The drums began at dusk, slow, deep, and steady as a heartbeat beneath the desert sky. Smoke rose from the central fire of the Apache camp, curling through the cold blue air. Warriors stood in a wide circle, their bodies painted with ochre and ash, feathers trembling in the wind. The scent of sage and sweat filled the canyon. Above them, the sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting the cliffs in dark copper. They said 13 warriors would fight tonight. 13 men for one woman's hand. Nalia stood at the edge of the circle, her chin lifted, her black hair braided with turquoise beads that caught the firelight. She was 19, the daughter of Chief Tazzy, his pride and his burden. Her face held no fear, though her heart was pounding like the drums. Tradition demanded the ceremony. Warriors would fight until only one remained standing. The victor would earn her hand, and with it, the right to stand beside her father as a future leader. But this time, there was an intruder among them. He stood apart from the circle, a tall man in a dusted duster coat, hat shadowing his eyes, boots scuffed from long miles of trail. His name was Luke Harlan, age 32, a ranch hand and drifter who'd ridden in from the borderlands 2 nights ago. His horse, a scarred gray Mustang, waited tethered near the rocks. Every Apache eye was on him, some in scorn, some in suspicion. The chief raised his staff, his voice deep and sure. 13 warriors, 13 hearts tested by fire. Tonight, the spirits choose who will bind with my daughter. The circle murmured. Eyes turned to Nalia, then to Luke. She didn't flinch, didn't turn away. She'd seen that man before, once, a year ago, when raiders came through their hunting grounds. He'd saved her then, shot 2 Comancheros before vanishing into the night. She'd never forgotten his calm, his silence, the way he didn't ask for thanks. Now he'd come back, into the one place he was not meant to be. Luke's gaze swept the circle, slow and deliberate. He saw the challenge in every painted face. He didn't come for glory or land or the promise of a woman's hand. He came because he'd heard Raven Eye, the strongest of the Apache warriors, had forced Nalia's name into the contest. And Raven Eye, age 27, was a man whose hands were stained with both blood and pride. Luke's hand brushed above his coat, not in threat, but memory. He'd seen what men like Raven Eye did to win. The chief's hand went up again, signaling silence. At dawn, he said, the contest begins. Tonight, the fire burns for courage. The drums continued. Sparks leapt into the dark. Luke turned toward his horse, the sound of whispers chasing him like wind through dry grass. He won't live till sunrise, someone hissed. And Nalia, she stood still, staring after him, wondering why the gods had brought him back. Luke sat by a small campfire beyond the canyon, cleaning his rifle with slow, practiced movements. Coyotes howled far off, and the night pressed in thick and cold. He didn't belong here. He knew that, but belonging was something he'd lost long ago. In the flicker of flame, he saw their faces again. The soldiers, the blood, the Apache village that burned when he was 23, when he rode as a scout for the Union Army. They'd called it a clearing operation. He called it what it was, a massacre. He'd walked away that day and never wore the uniform again. Now, he was here, trying to set one thing right. A soft sound, a step behind him. Luke turned sharply, his hand near the revolver. A young voice spoke from the shadows. You shouldn't have come. Nalia stepped into the firelight. Her gaze held his, steady, questioning, unafraid. My people will not forgive this. I know, he said simply. Then why stay? He looked at her for a long time. Because Raven Eye wants power more than peace. If he wins, your father loses his tribe. She folded her arms, studying him. The firelight danced on her bronze skin, her face strong and searching. You fight to save me, cowboy? He shook his head. No, I fight to stop men from owning what they can't love. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind sighed through the canyon. Somewhere, a drum echoed again, distant but alive. You'll die tomorrow, she said softly. Maybe, Luke answered, but I'll die on my feet. She turned away, walking into the dark, her figure fading between the mesquite shadows. Luke watched her go, his jaw tight, his chest aching in a way he hadn't felt in years. When she was gone, he whispered to the fire, "Not for your hand, girl, for your freedom." Dawn broke pale and cold over the canyon. The wind carried the sound of chanting, low, rhythmic, ancient. The warriors had gathered again, weapons in hand, bodies painted for battle. Luke walked into the circle, coat off, sleeves rolled, a knife strapped to his thigh. His eyes were calm, though the bruises of old fights lined his face. Chief Tazzy stood at the center, staff raised high. "Let the spirits decide," he said. The first duel began. Two warriors lunged at each other, raw power and fury clashing amid shouts. The crowd roared. Sand rose, blood followed. The loser fell, carried away by kin. The next fight began. Then another. Luke waited his turn, silent, watchful. He fought his first opponent, a young man with more pride than skill. The boy rushed him. Luke sidestepped, struck once, dropped him. The crowd murmured. No gloating, no cruelty, just precision. By the time Luke's second challenger fell, even the chief's eyes had changed. This outsider fought not to conquer, but to endure. Raven I watched from across the circle, his body painted black and red, his gaze fixed like a hawk's. He'd crushed every man who faced him, leaving none unbloodied. He was the favorite, the inevitable. Now only two remained. Luke faced Raven Eye as the wind howled through the canyon. The crowd fell silent. Raven Eye smiled, a cold, cruel twist. "You think you can take what's mine, white man?" Luke didn't answer. He lowered his stance, knife ready. The fight was a blur of motion and breath. Raven Eye charged, blade flashing. Luke dodged, countered, felt steel graze his arm. Blood ran hot down his sleeve. He kicked sand into Raven Eye's eyes, struck, missed by inches. The drums thundered. Raven Eye tackled him, both men rolling in dust and blood. Fists slammed, knives scraped stone. Luke's vision narrowed to sound and motion, heartbeat, breath, the grind of sand in his teeth. He twisted free, struck Raven Eye across the jaw, sent him sprawling. Raven Eye rose, spitting blood, knife raised high. The chief's voice cut through the roar. "Enough!" Both men froze. The chief looked at the sky. The sun had climbed past the rim of the canyon. Dawn's trial complete. "Tomorrow," said Chief Tazzy, "you'll finish what was begun." The crowd erupted in divided shouts, some for the warrior, some for the stranger. Nalia stood motionless, her pulse hammering. Her gaze found Luke's across the smoke and light. He looked back at her, chest heaving, eyes alive with something unspoken. That night, the camp fell into uneasy quiet. Warriors tended their wounds. Mothers prayed to the spirits. The fire burned lower. Luke sat apart, wrapping a cloth around his arm. His body ached, but his resolve burned bright. He could feel her watching from the shadows. He didn't turn, but he knew. She'd seen something in him, something that frightened her more than any blade. Hope. And in the hush between the last drumbeat and the wind's sigh, she whispered to herself, 13 fought for my hand, but only one fights for my soul." The dawn came thin and gray, the sky veiled with drifting smoke. Ravens circled over the canyon as men gathered again to witness the final duel. The air carried the scent of blood and dust, sharp as iron. Luke Harlan stood barefoot in the sand, knife in hand, shoulder bound tight, where Raven Eye's blade had cut him the day before. He'd slept little. Every muscle burned, yet his eyes were clear, steady as the horizon. Across the ring, Raven Eye flexed his hands, body painted anew, black streaks glistening across his chest. His gaze was fire and fury. "No tricks this time," he said, voice low, cutting through the morning hush. "We finish it." Luke nodded once. "Let's finish it." The chief raised the staff. Spirits watch. Blood decides. The drums began again, slower, heavier, a pulse older than words. The crowd's chanting rolled like thunder through the cliffs. They met in the center with a clash of steel and breath. Raven Eye lunged. Luke parried, countered, sidestepped. Dust rose beneath their boots. Blades flashed, cutting air and flesh alike. Each moved sharper, faster. Raven Eye struck high, Luke ducked low, slicing across the warrior's ribs. Blood spattered the sand. Rave and I snarled and slammed into him, sending both men tumbling. Luke hit the ground hard, his wound ripping open anew. He rolled, came up swinging. His knife caught Raven Eye's wrist, steel twisting free. The warrior drove his shoulder into Luke's chest, knocking him back toward the fire pit. A shout broke the air. Then a sound neither of them expected. Gunfire. The crowd scattered. Horses screamed. From the ridge above, a half-dozen rifles opened fire, bullets tearing into the camp. Luke dove behind a log, instinct taking over. "Get down!" he shouted, voice raw. Warriors fell where they stood. Women dragged children toward the rocks. Chief Tazzy bellowed orders, his staff rising and falling as he rallied his people. Luke glimpsed the attackers, white men in dusters and wide-brim hats, bounty hunters. One of them he recognized even at a distance. Cole Barrett, a wiry man of 40 with a red scarf and a grin like a scar. Raven, I shouted something Apache, grabbed his rifle and fired toward the ridge. But Barrett's men had already moved closer. The canyon filled with chaos and death. Nalia ran to the smoke, shouting for her father. She saw Luke crouch behind cover. Blood streaked across his face. Their eyes met for one breath before she was seized from behind. Rave and I turned, saw her struggling, and didn't hesitate. He lowered his rifle, called out to Barrett, "You want the cowboy? I'll bring him to you, but she comes with me." Barrett's laughter carried on the wind. "Do it quick, savage. We're paid by the scalp." Luke rose, rage igniting. He sprinted to the gunfire, bullets snapping past. He barely reached the edge of the circle when the world exploded in smoke. He saw Nalia thrown onto a horse, Rave and I leaping up behind her. The riders vanished into the rocks. Chief Tazzy fell to his knees beside the fire, an arrow in his leg. "My daughter," he roared. "Bring her back." Luke grabbed a rifle, turned toward the ridge, and pain shot through his shoulder as a bullet tore across it. He dropped behind a boulder, breath ragged, vision dimming. The bounty hunters were retreating now, taking their prize. He tried to rise again, but his body betrayed him. Darkness pressed down like the desert heat. The last thing he saw before the world went black was Nalia's turquoise beads catching the morning sun as she disappeared into the canyon. When Luke awoke, the fire was ash in silence. Buzzards wheeled overhead. Pain flared in his shoulder, crusted blood binding his shirt. He pulled himself upright, wincing as the camp came into focus. Bodies, ruins, the smell of burnt hide and gunpowder. Chief Tazzy sat nearby, leg bound with strips of cloth, his eyes hollow. "They took her," Luke said hoarsely. The old chief nodded. "Rave and I ride with devils now." He sold his honor for silver. Luke tightened the strap on his holster. "Then I'll ride after him." "You are one man," said Tazzy. "They are many." Luke's voice hardened. "I've been outnumbered before." He scavenged ammunition from fallen rifles, saddled his gray Mustang, and turned toward the open desert. Behind him, the chief called out, "If you find her, save her soul, not her name." Luke didn't look back. The desert stretched endless before him. Miles of red earth, cliffs like broken teeth, the sky white with heat. He followed hoof tracks, faint but visible. Each mile brought more silence, more ghosts. The wind tasted of ash. By the second night, he found the first body, a dead bounty man, half buried in sand, his gun gone, his face pecked clean by vultures. Luke studied the tracks. Rave and I was still ahead, driving hard, not hiding. Near sunset, he heard a rustle, a whisper of movement. He swung down, gun drawn. From the rock stumbled a boy, no older than 15, blood crusted on his arm. Luke recognized him instantly. Koa, Nalia's younger brother. "Easy, kid," Luke said, kneeling. "You hurt bad." The boy swayed, glaring at him. You brought this." Luke sighed. "Maybe, but I'm the one who's going to end it." Koa tried to pull away, but his strength failed. Luke bound his wound, gave him water. When the boy could speak again, his voice cracked. "They killed our warriors. Rave and I rides west to the Mexican border." Luke stared into the dying sun. "Then that's where we're going." They rode together as night fell, the boy's resentment sharp as the desert wind. Luke didn't blame him. He'd earned that hate. But under it, he saw something else. Fire, courage, the same that burned in Aaliyah's eyes. By dawn, they reached the river canyon. Smoke rose from a distant camp. A dozen men, maybe more. Through Luke's spyglass, they saw horses, wagons, a line of tethered captives. And in the center, bound to a post, was Aaliyah. Her hair hung loose, her face bruised but unbroken. Barrett's men lounged nearby, cleaning rifles. Raven and I argued with Barrett near the fire, gesturing angrily toward her. Luke lowered the glass. "They're fighting," he muttered. "What now?" asked Koa. Luke checked his rifle, eyes hard. "Now we wait till dark." The boy's jaw tightened. "We'll die." Luke gave a dry, humorless smile. "That's always been the wager." They huddled beneath the rocks, the heat pressing down. Luke's thoughts drifted to the war, to the blood he'd spilled, to every life he'd failed to save. Maybe this was his chance to do one thing right before the end. When night came, the desert cooled. The sky turned black and wide, the stars sharp as glass. Luke and Koa moved in silence, sliding through shadows toward the camp. The bounty hunters laughed around their fire. Barrett counted coins from a leather pouch, silver glinting in the light. Raven and I sat apart, his face hard, his knife glinting. Aaliyah's hands were tied to a wagon wheel. She watched the fire, her expression unreadable. Luke whispered, "You take the horses, cut the lines. When the shooting starts, get her out." Koa nodded, his small hands trembling but steady. "What about you?" "I'll make noise." Luke crept closer. Every step was measured, soundless, his heartbeat slow and sure. He reached the shadow of a wagon, raised his revolver, and fired once into the sky. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, stumbled for rifles. Koa darted through the dark, slashing reins. Luke fired again, hitting a man through the shoulder. The camp exploded in gunfire. Sparks filled the air like fireflies gone mad. Aaliyah kicked one guard square in the knee, knocking him down. She tore free a knife from his belt and cut her own ropes. Luke turned just as Barrett raised his rifle. Shot thundered. Barrett's bullet grazed Luke's hat. Splintering was behind him. Luke dove and returned fire, catching Barrett in the thigh. Raven and I came from nowhere, tackling Luke into the dirt. The knife flashed between them. "You should have stayed dead." Raven and I spat. Luke grunted, twisting, blocking a blow, driving his fist into the warrior's ribs. "You sold her." Raven and I slashed again, catching Luke's arm. Blood sprayed. Luke grabbed a burning log from the fire and swung it hard. It hit Raven Eye's face, sending him crashing into the sand. Koa and Aaliyah reached the horses. "Luke!" she screamed. He staggered to his feet, blood running down his chest. Barrett aimed again, but Koa fired a stolen rifle, the shot echoing. Barrett fell back, motionless. Luke grabbed Aaliyah's hand, pulling her toward the canyon path. Behind them, the camp burned bright, flames devouring tents and wagons. Raven and I rose once more, his face half-burned, eyes wild. He threw his knife, missed by inches. They ran into the dark, gunfire fading behind them, the desert wind swallowing all sound. At the ridge, Luke turned for one last look, the fire flickering wound against the endless night. He didn't know if they'd survive for long, but for the first time, he felt alive. Aaliyah looked at him through the moonlight, her voice barely a whisper. "You came." Luke nodded. Always was headed this way. The night had died screaming. The canyon lay behind them, black and echoing, its walls streaked with ash and gunpowder. Eli's horse staggered under him, bleeding from the flank. Naira rode ahead, her braid torn loose, her face streaked with smoke and dust. Dawn came slow, bleeding pink along the eastern rim of the desert. The storm had moved on, but not far enough to take the danger with it. They stopped by a dry creek bed, both too spent to speak. Eli slid from the saddle and sank to his knees. His shirt clung dark with blood. Naira dismounted and dropped beside him, hands trembling as she tore a strip from her shawl and pressed it to his side. "You should have left me back there," he rasped. She shook her head, eyes fierce. Then you'd be bones in that canyon. He laughed, short, bitter. Might have saved you trouble. No, she said softly. You saved me. Trouble or not. The air smelled of wet dust and gun oil. A hawk circled overhead, crying into the pale sky. Eli looked up at it, squinting. They'll be coming soon. They already are, Nara whispered. She tilted her chin toward the ridge. Dark silhouettes moved against the dawn. Riders, a dozen or more, closing the distance like a slow-moving storm. Eli forced himself to his feet. 13 men for 1 woman. Never seen odds like that. Her gaze flicked to him, steady and unreadable. In my tribe, they don't fight for me. They fight for the honor of it. The one who wins earns my father's blessing. And what about your heart? For a long moment she didn't answer. The wind tugged at her braid, carrying the smell of sage and rain. That doesn't belong to any man's blade, she said finally. It belongs where it's understood. Eli watched her turn away toward the rising light. She looked small against the desert, young, proud, unbreakable. You'll have to go back, he said. If you don't, they'll hunt you to the end of the earth. I know. Then let me ride with you. She looked at him, eyes glinting with something close to sorrow. They'll kill you for standing beside me. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. He gave a crooked smile. And I'd rather die beside you than live knowing I ran. Something changed in her eyes, something deep and wordless. She didn't speak again, just nodded once. Together. They mounted their horses and rode east toward the scarred plain where her tribe waited. By midday, the land stretched endless around them. Sand, rock, heat shimmer. The sky burned white. They rode without speaking, the silence between them heavy but alive. When the smoke of the Apache camp appeared on the horizon, Eli's jaw tightened. He knew the look of war camps, knew the smell of blood and pride that clung to them. Drums were beating low and steady, like the pulse of the earth itself. Nara slowed her horse. They'd begun the trials. He glanced at her. What kind of trials? Tests of strength, courage, and heart. The winner claims me at sundown. Eli exhaled. And if I were fool enough to stand among them? She met his gaze, a tear glinting but not falling. Then you'd be no fool to me. The drums grew louder. Dust swirled around the approaching riders. The tribe's warriors, 13 men painted in red and black, waited in a wide circle. Nara's father, Chief Quanah, stood at the center, his gray hair braided tight, his eyes fierce beneath the paint. Eli felt their eyes on him like knives. He'd faced outlaws, bounty men, soldiers, but never this kind of judgment. He dismounted slowly, hat in hand. Chief Kohana's voice rolled across the silence. White man, you ride with my daughter. You bring her through fire. You bleed for her. But this land is not yours, nor is she. Eli nodded once. Understood. The chief's gaze hardened. Then why are you here? Eli looked at Nara. Because I can't ride away. The warriors murmured, low and dangerous. Nara stepped forward, head high. He fought for me. He saved me from the men who burned the ridge. If honor means anything, he's earned his place among them. Her father's expression didn't change. Then let him prove it. The drums thundered. The circle of warriors closed around them. Each man bore a mark. Painted lines on their faces, feathers braided into their hair, scars carved by old battles. Eli stood out like a ghost among them. Pale skin, dust-smeared, eyes hollow from days of running. The first trial began with the bow. Each warrior fired at a painted target across the open plain. Arrows whistled through the hot air, thudding into the heart of a wooden effigy. Eli took the bow when his turn came. The men laughed. The string creaked under his hand. He drew, sighted, and let fly. The arrow struck dead center. The laughter stopped. The second trial tested courage. A wild horse, untamed and screaming, was loosed into the circle. One by one, the warriors tried to mount it. Most were thrown. Eli stepped forward last. He caught the reins as the horse reared, muscles straining, sand flying. He didn't try to dominate it. He whispered, calm and low, till the beast settled under him. When he swung into the saddle, The crowd roared. The third trial was combat. Bare-handed, one by one, they faced each other in the dust. The blows were fast, brutal. Eli fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He dropped one after another, bloody, panting, but still standing. By sundown, only 3 men remained. Eli, a scarred warrior named Tulaco, and Naira's cousin Caton, proud and merciless. Chief Koana raised his hand. The last test is the heart. Each man will speak truth before the fire. No lies, no fear. The sun dipped low. Fire crackled in the center of the circle. Shadows stretched long. The tribe gathered, silent as the stars rose. Tulaco spoke first. I would take Naira to my people in the mountains. I would give her sons and keep her safe. Caton stepped forward next, voice hard. She belongs here. I will keep her among her own. The white man will leave, and she will forget him. Then Eli stepped forward. His face was streaked with sweat and dirt. His voice was rough, but steady. I can't promise her peace. Not out there, not in a land that keeps breaking itself. But I can promise her choice. Not chains, not orders, just freedom, to ride beside me or not at all. A long silence followed. The flames cracked and hissed. Naira's eyes shimmered in the firelight. She looked from one man to the next, her breath trembling. Her father turned to her. The choice is yours. She stepped forward slowly. The warriors waited, shoulders tense. Her gaze moved across them. Tulaco's proud calm, Caton's cold certainty, then stopped on Eli. He stood apart, bloodied, breath ragged, eyes soft with something that had no name. She raised her hand and pointed. Him. The world seemed to stop. The circle broke into murmurs, shock, anger, disbelief. Chief Kohana's face hardened, then softened, as if some long-hidden truth had finally come home. He stepped forward, lifting his staff. So be it. Caton's fury burned bright. You would let her go with him? A white man. The chief's voice boomed. He fought with honor. He bled for her. What more proof does a man need? Caton lunged, drawing his knife. The crowd screamed. Eli moved first, catching his wrist, twisting hard. The knife fell. They crashed into the dust. Fists in fury, the fire scattering sparks around them. Caton's blade flashed again. Eli caught it with his forearm, pain searing through him, then drove his shoulder forward, slamming Caton down. The knife clattered away. Caton lay still, breath ragged. Eli stood over him, chest heaving. The chief raised his hand again. Enough! Silence fell. The firelight flickered on blood, sweat, and tears. Naira stepped to Eli's side. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then her father's voice broke the stillness. You have her heart, he said quietly. Guard it well. This land eats the weak. Eli nodded. So does every land. Naira took his hand. Together, they turned toward the dark horizon. Behind them, the tribe began to chant, a song of farewell of courage of the endless road. As they rode away beneath the rising moon, the wind carried her voice, soft but certain. They fought for my hand, she said, glancing back once. But you were the only one who fought for my soul. Eli smiled faintly. Guess I just got lucky. No, she said. You just listened. The desert stretched ahead, vast and silent. The stars burned cold. Their horses moved steady into the dark. And somewhere beyond the dunes, a new life waited. One not won by strength or blood, but by the quiet power of choice. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this. The frontier was never just a place. It was a test of hearts. And sometimes, the bravest fight of all isn't for land or pride, but for the right to choose who you ride beside. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.